Hello. I know I'm a little late. I had to push the time back, so hopefully people will jump on. You were expecting me at 1 o'clock, and I had a meeting that someone dropped in my lap last minute. I had to get dressed for. So hopefully you guys can still jump on. I know you were expecting me at 1 o'clock. Huh? Yeah, that turned out to be, I had to do something else really quickly. And I'm really, really sorry because this is something I have planned, but it was an important meeting. Sorry, I'm trying to communicate with a client. You hear that text messaging. Let's see. So I know I'm on here. Let me see. Oh, okay. She just taped it to my door. Oh, exciting. Exciting stuff. Getting text messages about. I am sorry that I got on here later than I had planned on getting on here. I had a last minute meeting that dropped into my lap that I had to get dressed today to go to this meeting, and it was from 12 to supposedly 1-ish. It went over as normal. So I had to push this back. I promise you I will not do that. They had planned the meeting but didn't include me in the email, and I kept saying, "What time is the meeting? What time is the meeting? What time is the meeting? Do I need to be at the meeting?" Yes, you need to be at the meeting. Well, I don't have an invite. So I got the info at 10:30 this morning and had to be there at 12. So I got it together. But I wanted to jump on here because we're talking about the impact of fatherlessness. And in talking about the impact of fatherlessness, we wanted to go through some statistics. There was one of the viewers of TFGF. They were like, a lot of statistics are thrown around out here, and what's your take on fatherlessness? And some of these statistics are off. They don't seem to be in sync. They don't seem to be in line. And that's very true. I'm going to give you some examples today of what that looks like. But I only want to spend a few minutes on here, and I'll come on here every Friday. I'm going to do 1 o'clock. As people are having, oh, good afternoon, Paul. As people are starting to meet in person. Yeah. Oh, it's only 5 minutes from your house. It was 4 miles from my house, which meant 15 minutes in South Florida. So anyway, it was worth it. Just to give you a little tidbit, my goal is always to be a solution and to eradicate fatherlessness. And even in the state that I feel like I'm in, I don't always feel like showing up these days, but I'm here. And we are doing a 2-week intensive of peer groups here in South Florida, but we're including single moms in the equation. And this particular group that we were meeting with the YMCA that I'm a part of, we're going to add therapy, this therapeutic component. And the goal is to help the mothers get the same information we're giving the children in these peer groups to help them overcome their fatherless journey and aspects, and giving them the therapy on the spot and on the scene as well. So it should be an interesting undertaking. Hey, Dayani, it should be an interesting undertaking as we do this for the first time. I've never worked with single mothers. I'll be honest with you, I had no interest in working with single mothers, but after all of my peer groups, single moms are constantly coming up to me saying, "Hey, I need what it is that you teach my children. I need, and I'm like, yeah, I know you do, but all the resources, I was thinking that they were already out there for them. No offense to single moms. I'm just not a single mother, but I'm recognizing now that I can, just like with the fathers, I can speak to the single mother's fatherless journey, but they're going to have to hold on for the ride because I'm going to be just as hard on them as I am with the fathers. So as we get into this conversation today, I'm only going to spend 30 minutes on here. This is not a long conversation. We want to talk about the impact of fatherlessness by highlighting, particular statistics on Friday. And if you're just joining, I'm Dr. Torri J. I'm the founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation. When people ask, how are you doing? I'm going to ask you guys, how are you doing? I'm going to tell you how I'm doing. Because I think it's important, even in even being virtually, where things are opening up. But how are you doing is what I want to know today. I am having kind of day. I don't want to always show up, but I'm here, not just with you guys, but just present and doing all the stuff that I have to do. Um, Talking to clients. When clients texting me, you can hear the click. Some of you heard that while you've been on here. Yeah, yeah, some silly stuff that's going on, and I'm texting my clients about what not to do. It's not legal advice, it's personal advice. And so yeah, today's a kind of day. So tell me how your day is. It's sunny here in South Florida, but there's a lot of things outside my window. Like if you could see outside this, like these are panels that so you can't see out. There are so many trucks outside my window making noise all times of the day. So that might be the reason, one of the reasons I'm having an kind of day, because it started early. So while we're talking about statistics, is we're going to get into this conversation surrounding statistics. What I want to do right now is we're going to start with the number one statistic surrounding fatherlessness. Let's talk about how many children are fatherless. I want to deal with the person who asked me to do this. I'm realizing that there is a reason, because there's a lot of different numbers out here. And I don't know if they're motivated. Let's be honest and say they probably are motivated from a biased perspective. So let's read this. We know that there are 24 to 25 million, 24.7 million children who are fatherless, who are living absent of their biological fathers. Now, what that could mean is there are some children who have a father in the home, right, who is emotionally absent. I'm assuming that they're also including that based on some of the writing and reading in that particular statistic. But I'm not 100% sure. So let's go on to some of the other stuff. But here's where it gets funny. Okay, so 57.6% of Black children, 31.2% of Hispanic children, and 20.7% of white children are living absent of biological fathers. Can we talk about why we think that is? Why do you think there are different numbers based on demographics and races? I can tell you Black children, that was part of the setup. That was part of fatherlessness from the get-go. We were impacted highly because it was designed to impact our households from Social Security Act, welfare reform. The case of the Negroes, the Moynihan Report details that. Hispanic children. Being in Atlanta, and one of the peer groups that I had very early on, probably it was one of the first, it was in an area that had a lot of demographics. It was very diverse. It had the children from Buckhead. It had the children, which Buckhead is an affluent area, children from Brookhaven, affluent but a little more diverse. Then it had Buford Highway on the back of it. Buford Highway was everything from African to Hispanic, right? Mostly Mexico, El Salvador, if I'm remembering some of the kids that their backgrounds. I remember having a lot of children who were from Mexico. So let's have this conversation about Hispanic children and their dynamic. One little girl that I had in my group, she was Hispanic. She was from Mexico, and her father was a migrant worker. So he was only home for 3 months out of the year, but her mother wanted her in the group because she didn't have a father in the home on a consistent basis. Not that he wasn't a part of the family, not that he was disengaged from the family in a sense, but he was away working. So I want us to pay attention to why some of these demographics or why some of these statistics exist. Black children, like I said, this was part of the journey. This was part of the plan. But there's also mass incarceration. We're learning that there's a myth concerning Black fathers. They may not live in the home, but they're more active than any of the other age group or the other races when it comes to fathering their children outside the home. I believe that's because they've been doing it the longest. I believe that's because they have an understanding of how to still stay engaged as much as they possibly can while living outside the home, because they've been doing it from the onset of this horrible pandemic. When you look at white children, it's 20.7% of white children are living absent of their biological fathers. That tends to be a higher rate of divorce. And when divorce happens, unwed pregnancies are starting to also increase within the white communities. But that's definitely, divorce is on the rise. And that demographic started to really feel the brunt of fatherlessness as divorce became easier to obtain. I want to go here because I'm scrolling through. I found something that I thought was kind of interesting. I was like, see, this is where people question the numbers, right? There's some positions. And let me say this too. I know we see doom and gloom, but I said this on Help Is on the Way Thursdays yesterday. I know that the number, there was like a bell and it went up, right? And I believe it's coming down. There are some numbers that talk about, it's from the Census Bureau in 2012. And from 1960s, right? We have white children and we have Black children. Those were the only children they were counting in this whole demographics of fatherlessness. 6.1% for white children, 19.9% for Black children in the 1960s. 1980s came, hello, war on drugs, stuff like that. 13.3% or 13.5% for white families and white children, 19.6% for Hispanic children. This is when we first started calculating Hispanic families into the equation of fatherlessness. Interesting. Then African American children, Black children, were 43.9% were growing up fatherless. Okay. Then in the 1990s to 2000, those numbers increased as well. So we watched it double from 1970 to 1980. And then from 1980 to 1990, we see, and it's doubled for not only Black children, but also for white children. If we look at 1970, it was 7.8. Sorry, that's the office line. Let me cancel that. 1970, it was 7.8 for white children, 29.5 for Black children, right? 1980, it was 13.5 for white children, 19.6 for Hispanic children, as I said, and 43.9% for Black children. 1990, we went from 13.5 for white children to 16.2, 19.6 to 27.1, and 49.3 to 51.2. But there's something that starts to happen in 2000. That 51.2 starts to go down to 51.1. Not a lot, but it's enough to pay attention. This thing is going down. It even goes down for Hispanic children from 1990 to 2000. So let me look at this. Hispanic children go from 27.1 to 25.1. But here's something interesting. White families are increasing. Did you guys know that? While everyone else is going down, white families are going up. So 1990 to 2000, white families go to 16.2 to 17.3. Living without a father in the home. And then 2010 hits, and white families go up another 10% to 18.3, while Hispanic families go up to 26.3 from 25.1, but Black families go down 48.5% in 2010. Now, I need you guys to pay attention to this. Like, there is clearly an increase that happens, but there's a decrease that's happening within Black families for whatever reason. We need to pay attention to that, because so often when we talk about fatherlessness, we're only talking about, many times, Black children. We call white children alienated. We call Hispanic children alienated. We may call them fatherless. We may be like, oh, they have a whole village around them based on how they are raised in a community. That's a cultural and a traditional thing. But we're not paying attention to the fact that within the white community, fatherlessness is on the rise, and it's still on the rise. I want to delve into something else that brought my attention to some of these crazy numbers. One study was showing, and I'm sorry I came on here late. That's my fault. That's really, really my fault, because I know a lot of people were anticipating this. So please forgive me. Hopefully you will watch it in replay. And if you are watching it in replay, please put replay in the box. Okay. I'm doing this because I think it needs to be understood. And someone was like, Dr. Torri, we really need to tackle these numbers, because there's so many different numbers that exist out here, and we don't know what numbers are really real. What numbers I want you to pay attention to is the fact that as other people are going down, other races are going down, white families are going up. We've got to pay attention to why. I want us to look at why, and maybe we'll do that another day, because I don't want to stay on here a long time. I've only got like 15 more minutes. Hold on, and I saw something. Maybe it's not showing up here for a reason. I saw something I was looking up on my way back from that meeting that I want to highlight. I need to highlight it today. It had a lot of different, had two different numbers. And I'm like, how do you have two different numbers? Where is it? Oh, this is important, you guys. How did I lose it? I don't know how I lost it. But one said it was like 57.1% of African American children were growing up fatherless. But then the other one was like 50. Oh, there it is. I did find it. So there it is. There's that one. There it is. Okay. I'm like, how did I lose that? So here are two different stats. 57.6% of Black children are growing up in fatherless homes. This is a Census Bureau report, July 1st, 2012. But then you have another one. Now, this is interesting. I want to read this to you. It's from the same report, but it's talking about living arrangements. With the increased number of premarital births and a continuing high divorce rate, the proportion of children living with just one parent rose from 9.1% in 1960 to 20.7%. We read those. And then 55.1% for Black children. And then it goes through those numbers that I was reading earlier. I'm trying to figure out, are they adding the premarital births, the unwed parenting, and the divorce rates? And so they're getting different numbers? I'm not really sure. I'm going to have to go look at that in more detail. But I want you to recognize the fact that there is something to say about the increase in, or the increase in divorce rates and the ability to get a divorce on a whim, on a dime, in a drop of a hat, and how that's impacting children, how that's impacting what children are being raised in the midst of, what that looks like. And not having a father in the home, whether we know it or not, is having a mental and emotional impact on the children. The meeting that I just came from, the mental health advisors and administrators who were in that meeting, all agree that those who become parents don't always have the tools they need in the midst of becoming a parent. They go from childhood to motherhood or fatherhood. They skip manhood and womanhood altogether so often because what they're dealing with is looking for love because they didn't grow up with it. We had that conversation today. But there's also individuals who got married early, had children, didn't know themselves, found themselves in a divorce, and with divorce rate being so high, and I get it, the divorce rate being so high, you then have to navigate what that looks like for you and your family. I can tell you, I know blended families is a term that we use, but I saw a phrase recently where it says, blended families can't blend if they don't bond. And too often there is so much vitriol, emotional behavior that people, how are you going to bond with the new family when you're the old family and you're pissed about the situation that you're in? It doesn't happen that often. It's a very difficult thing to do. And so then you're having children be raised in a fatherless home because you can't even blend the two households together. But I want us to know that we have solutions to this, and it's healing. It's healing. Did you know that 77% of the American population believes that fatherlessness is one of the greatest social ills our country has ever faced? The truth is we don't know how to do anything about it. We believe it's the most significant family or social problem in America, but we don't know what to do about it. And this was a poll done in January of 1999. But although we know it's an issue, we won't address the issue. Although we know it's an issue, we continue to allow things to be in place that keeps the narrative that fathers don't want to be present, that children growing up fatherless are going to be okay, they'll be just fine. And we then give a lot of tools and resources to single moms. Not that they don't need the resources, but I believe that we need to share those resources across the board so that we're solution driven and not politically incentivized. When we do that, we will create a better society and a better life for those just looking outside the window. Hey, PJ, how are you? And just paying attention to this. This is a different realm for me to be able to talk about fatherlessness and how that impacts us and what that looks like. Sorry, my dress is weird. And how that impacts us. But I want us to pay attention to the fact that these numbers are going down in other communities, but in the white communities, it's going up. It's going up. Is it because and I want your engagement on this. Why do you think it's going down for other communities and going up for white communities? And I shared this yesterday that I felt like when we were talking about the 37% who didn't have access, I believe that number had gone up at one point, but I believed it was also coming down. I was right after looking at these numbers today. It's coming down for certain races and certain cultures. Why do you think it's going up for the white race and going down for Hispanic and African-American people? You guys have any thoughts on that? Why do you think it's going up for the white race and down for other races? Fatherlessness. Is it parental alienation? Could be. I don't know if people count that as fatherlessness as much as Black families do. Black families look at fatherlessness as the father's nowhere to be found, nowhere around. That's how we view that. What do you guys think? I need some communication. I know I ain't got that many people on here this afternoon, partially because I came on an hour after I said I was coming on. But I had to take that emergency meeting. What do you guys think? Do you know? No idea. They're like, I don't even know. I think it's divorce. I do. I think it's divorce. I think there's an increase in unwed parenting within the white community like never before. I think that's a part of it. If I'm just thinking about what I know and what I experience. I used to only get calls from Black fathers. Now I get a lot of calls from white fathers. It's interesting. And every dynamic is different. Every situation is different. Some of them are alienated. And if I can be candid with you, some of the fathers who are white. I don't mean to make it a race thing, but I gotta have this conversation in this way. There's a place where I'm going to sue the judge. I'm going to sue this person. I'm going to do all this. And it just doesn't exist like that for Black fathers or Hispanic fathers. They're looking for the solution versus the fight. And they're not kowtowing. They're not bowing down, meaning the Black fathers and the Hispanic fathers. They just recognize how to navigate it differently. And I have some white fathers that I've reunited, but if I can be honest with you, it is much harder to reunite white fathers because they have a perspective. The perspective is Title 4D, the court systems are corrupt, and all attorneys are corrupt. Get it. Had that conversation yesterday. But if you want to reunite with your children, you're going to have to throw out the idea that everyone is against you. And that if I'm sitting in front of you, that means that I'm for you. And then we have to figure out what's the next plan, what's the next situation. So PJ says, Dr. Torri, my own struggle is the issue of my local courts. My name is on my kid's birth certificate in the state of Tennessee because if I wasn't married, it would cost damn near $10,000 to start. Was told by my family court judge, get a second job during the pandemic. Okay. And trust me, PJ, that's been told to Black fathers the whole time. So I get it. Even being on the birth certificate doesn't mean much other than you're responsible to pay. It is a very unjust law. It's a very unjust situation, especially if you're in the delivery room expecting once your name is on the birth certificate, that carries some weight as a parent, and it doesn't. And then when you're unwed, it really it carries no weight at all. And dad signed that birth certificate believing that it's carried weight. And they signed the acknowledgement of paternity believing that it's the same thing. And it doesn't. It's just a responsibility to pay when you're an unwed father. And being in that situation, you've got to understand. I can tell you we've tried and we'll probably try again. Broward County or Broward Health is going to start allowing us to do the flyers that we've talked about, the different steps. It's a few other steps. I love Georgia because it's like 1, 2, 3. Haven't been able to get that in, but giving fathers flyers who are unwed fathers on what that looks like, once they sign that documentation, because you guys are signing this documentation unaware that doesn't mean that your children aren't, it doesn't mean that you have access to your children. He says, I've been involved actively in my child's life since birth. And I get it, but they still don't count you that way because you're unwed. It's called, like, you got to remember the term back in the day, it's called a bastard child. It's called illegitimacy. That's why Georgia still used the term legitimation, coaching and PTA meetings and field trips. Yep. And yet, how often do you see your children, PJ? Hey, Darren, how are you? How often do you see your children? And this is how they start counting fatherlessness, right? The statistics I'm reading, it's talking about fathers who don't live in the home. It's all about living arrangements. Living arrangements do matter. I don't care what people say. Your children don't live in the home with you. They're not getting full access to you. And they're being raised in a home with a mother 90% of the time who is putting her stamp on who the children need to be. And then you get to see your children maybe 6, 10 times max out of the month. You see, he said, I haven't seen him in 7 months. He hasn't seen his children. So then you can't parent, you can't put your stamp on it, and your children become fatherless. In their birth states, I'm acknowledged as father. We moved her. Yeah, you may be acknowledged as father, but does that mean that you have parenting time? Did you go to court for that? Did the birth certificate, because most states birth certificates signing birth certificates don't mean that you have access to your children, especially if they're unwed. And that's how they're counting these numbers and statistics. And that's why people get upset. Well, my children have a father. Okay, I understand that. But not living in the home with you speaks volumes to their development. That's what you got to know. Because there's one sole person, a sole individual developing that child. I've asked other, I won't even say what name, but I've asked people the question of, if their parent is a master manipulator, the mother is a master manipulator, and they're raised in the home with them 95% of the time, why wouldn't they be anything but a master manipulator? You see what I'm saying? Like if your child is raised in the home with a depressed bipolar parent, do you think that they're going to come out unscathed without any mental health issues? And they're raised in that home 90% of the time? Living arrangements speaks to the child's development. And so that's why 50-50 shared parenting is so important. And it's important even when it comes to these census polls and all of this stuff that we read, these statistics. They're super important. But if you don't recognize how important they are, you're going to say as a single mother, my children be just fine without their father. And part of that is the mental health component, believing that when you grew up without a biological father, you turned out just fine. Although you're repeating cycles that you think that, well, it's fine. I'm successful. I'm able to pay my bills. I have education. But where are you mentally, baby girl? Where are you mentally, my love? And where you are mentally is destructive. Massachusetts did acknowledge my paternity. I was with my ex till 2 years ago, 5 months after I left my new BF. Okay. And he gets them more than me. After I left my new, what's the BF? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. After I left, she got a new boyfriend. And yeah, that's how that works. She's replacing the daddy. She's replacing the father. He's not just a boyfriend anymore. That's father replacement. Because he's probably living in the home, or he has more time in the home than you do. And so he then gets replaced. Go to TFGF's Instagram page. There's a little girl, and she says, her mother's like, oh, daddy, you fixed the bike, blah, 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 right? And she was like, tell him thank you, tell daddy thank you. And the little girl turns and she's like, he's not my daddy. My daddy in jail and I miss him. And the mother's like, oh, Kayla, or whatever the little girl's name is. Oh. And it's like, you just replaced that little girl's father and she's old enough to know that's not her daddy. My daddy is in jail and I miss him. And instead of the mothers helping their daughters navigate missing their fathers and being heartbroken, they just bring another man into the equation. And so you wonder why we grow up and that's all we do. We just keep replacing people with other people. Because that's what your mother did. She brought a new uncle, new boyfriend, a new daddy to the equation and just said, here's your new daddy. And kids know the difference. But this is where we're dealing. This is why we're dealing with fatherlessness. He said, yep, we were together 15 years, never got married, 2 years with dude, wedding bells. Well, now I got to ask you, why didn't you marry her? You have children with her. Why didn't you marry her? And you can say now, you're like, well, I saw some signs. 15 years? That's a long time. Why didn't you marry her, PJ? Was she upset that you didn't marry her? Because women will get upset. Like, I got children with you. It's 15 years later. What's the problem? I'm not good enough to marry? He said, not my choice. So she didn't want to marry you. Okay. Okay. See, this is all underlining stuff. Does she have children with the new guy? Let me ask that. Does she have children with the new guy? He said, I wanted to marry her. Gotcha. And let me ask you, because I always ask this question. No, she doesn't have children with the new guy. Okay. So what was her upbringing? What was her upbringing? Was she raised with her father and her mother in the same household? Was she married? Yeah. Was she raised with her mother and father? And if she was raised with her mother and father, was her father emotionally engaged? Was there abuse in the home? You're always going to find a root of something. You were with her for 15 years, so you know the answer to this. You know the answer to this. So I want to know. Hey, Monique, how are you? I'm going to call you after this. I got to study. I got to focus. My neighbors brought me some medicine, some vitamins to help me focus, y'all. It's been rough. I have so much going on I want to cry half the time. But she brought me some vitamins that's going to help me focus to get this homework done. And prayerfully it helps. But I'm going to call you when I'm done with this. Dad was drug addicted, didn't reconnect till she was 20 and had a stepdad, and she refuses to deal with her issues. Yeah. And so that's one of the reasons why she didn't marry you. And maybe she's dealing with something, and so she's made the decision now to marry this guy. Her not wanting to marry you has nothing to do with you. Maybe nothing is kind of a term that I shouldn't like blanket it that way and make it generalized. But if it has anything to do with you, it's minimal, right? We have to acknowledge that people and their issues are their issues. Marriages don't work not just because two people didn't make it work. Sometimes it's one person. You can't be in a marriage by yourself. You can't be in a relationship by yourself. And if one person is doing the work in healing and moving forward and the other person isn't, you're going to run into a lot of issues. I have continuously been in therapy due to childhood trauma. Yeah. And she wasn't willing to do that at the time. Now she's probably doing that. I hate these kind of dresses. You gotta keep pulling on them. Yeah, I got you. That was a must. So it doesn't work when one person's growing and the other person isn't. You have to, in relationships, whether it's dating or married, whatever that situation is, you have to constantly work on you. None of us have grown up unscathed by fatherlessness. In this generation, you can say, oh, I had both of my parents, but then there were some things that you didn't deal with, that you didn't have. And unfortunately for parents, I'm realizing this more and more. I don't care how great you think your parents are. There's always some trauma. And there's always some things you wanted them to do better. He said she wouldn't do therapy ever. And that's why you didn't get married, PJ. She's doing something different now. And it may be the breakup between the two of you caused her to do that, but she's doing something different now that's opening the door for that. And so don't take it personal that she's now wedding bells. Don't take it personal. Take it personal that, you can't see your children. Take that part personal and do what you need to do to get involved. But you've always got to, yeah, Monique said, say that louder. Yeah, you got to work on you. Your relationship isn't falling apart because of the other person. The relationship falls apart because of you. Because if you're in the position to do what you need to do and get the trauma out, you won't have the outbursts in the situations that you have in your life. She's a nurse that hated dealing with psychology. Yeah. Look, career doesn't mean a dang old thing. There are doctors and lawyers and judges and you just name it. You can put the whole thing, you can put the greatest title on there possible. Barack Obama said he grew up without his father and he paid a tremendous price for that. He said, I know the price I paid for that. He's president of the United States. He paid a price for that. And Michelle talks about that price in that book, Letters to My Father. He's one of the most vocal presidents, and I'm using him as a president just simply because that's somebody that we look high up to as the term president. You may not like Barack Obama. I'm not endorsing nobody politically. But that's the status that we all think is like the highest achievement. Yet he had fatherless issues, and they carried with him even through his presidency. Okay? PJ says, love me some Obama. Everybody got their opinion one way or another. I am on here, PJ, and I'm not taking sides one way or another. I have my issues with all of them because none of them are perfect. It's very much so like a parent. I got my issues with all of y'all, and none of you perfect. I can acknowledge the good that you do, but I can also highlight the bad that you do. It's 36 minutes in, but I want to pay attention to the fact that living arrangements matter. And they matter concerning your development as a child and your child's development. Many of you are repeating the cycles and the habits of your upbringing. Many of you are dealing with just how to navigate this thing, and you haven't done it. And you can look at the numbers once again. I go back to it. I know statistics are boring. I get it. But I read them to you. And as I read these statistics to you, there's an uptick when it comes to white homes as of 2000, and it's going down for Black homes. Why is that? You've got to ask yourself that question. Why is that? There is something that is really happening within the Black community that other cultures got to grasp onto. And the reason, I look at some of these groups and you're missing Black. You're missing the African-American man. And you're missing them in numbers. You may have a few sprinkled in there, but I go to these meetings and there's very few. They have the solution. They have the answer that you need. How to navigate being alienated. And it's not just doing whatever the mother wants you to do and being manipulated. And it's not just sitting out and waiting until the child's 18. Some Black men have done that, but Black men have found themselves to get educated and to build community around themselves. And I know a lot of Black fathers now who have primary custody in numbers that I am shocked about, especially in Georgia. And I know one of the attorneys who's getting that for them. I needed that answer. Okay, well, I'm glad I gave you some answer that you needed. But just know that statistics are real. And I'm going to get on here and talk about other ones. I want to talk about the anger factor. And I don't like necessarily the way that the statistic is written up, but I do want to talk about it. I do want to talk about how 85% of those who are growing up in fatherless homes, or not growing up in fatherless homes, 85% of those who are rapists or child molesters come from fatherless homes. And I want to discuss this. It's going to be a tough one. I may do it next week. I may do it the week after, but we had to deal with the first statistic out of them all. We had to deal with what's the numbers surrounding fatherlessness, how Black dads are getting their kids. Oh, okay. I got you. That's the answer that you needed. Yeah. Black dads the numbers are going down. They're getting the information. They're building community around themselves. They're tackling it from a solutions-driven place, not a fighting, I'm going to fight the judge and the attorney and the this and the that, and everybody's against me. They're fighting it, looking for solutions. When dads come to me, they're apologizing for making the mistakes they made. Maybe they disappeared and they didn't make the right choices, and they own it. They own it. But they also own the fact that she's done some really bad things too. You got to own your part in the journey in order to embrace the next steps of the journey. And they do that. They do that very well when it comes to coming to me. We have to fight differently. Too many fathers are wearing themselves out, trying to accuse the judge, trying to do this and that. There are ways around that. And sometimes you just didn't pick the right attorney. You picked an attorney, you saw it online, a friend said it worked, and you didn't investigate. And I've said this before, you didn't investigate. And so you got stuck with somebody who just took your money and kept it moving, child. And now your children are living without you in the home, and they're having to deal with that. You can't fight that big power. Yeah, I do admit I was wrong on so many things. Yeah, you can't, and then the dads have very little money, very little money. Can't fight that kind of thing with little money. And I know you're trying to figure out, well, why do I have to use money to fight it? Unfortunately, that's the way it's set up for now. And as we continue, as different organizations continue to fight and do different public policies and different things in order to help change legislation to get you what you need, you've got to fight with the tools you got. Stop trying to fight things with tools you don't have. That's why you're going to keep losing. I'll give you a biblical story because that's who I am. When you think about David, right? He was fighting Goliath, right? Big power. They put all that armor on him and he was like, wait a minute, this ain't even me. Like, I can't even wear this. Some of you are wearing things and putting stuff on and fighting people for no reason. I remember somebody called me and wanted this and that. And I was like, nah, you can't. When an attorney calls a client and asks for their attorney information or whatever that may be, don't give that attorney your attorney's information and there's no paperwork filed or anything. They're just trying to start something up that you don't even want started up. And they're going to just keep billing and billable hours. No, we have to learn how to work on our stuff ourselves. You don't have to involve the law in half this stuff you guys are involved in the law in. Some of it, yes, it requires it. You got to get a piece of paper that says you got custody rights. But some of this stuff, you guys don't even need to, like it. You ain't got to go to court for that. There's mediation. There's mediators like me. There's mediation at the courthouse. There's mediation outside the courthouse. There's therapy. There's reunification therapy. There's a lot of different things. And yes, you may be fought on all of it, but you've got to just start chipping away at what that looks like so that you may not live in the home with your children, but you have more than 6 days a month with your children. You don't go 7 months without seeing your children. That is unacceptable. And I'm not blaming you, PJ. It's unacceptable that the mother thinks she can get away with that and replace daddy with the new boyfriend. What's not being told to her? Who's counseling her and continuing a cycle? Her father was drug addicted or alcohol addicted. You think she said drug addicted, and she had to reunite with him at 20. And then she had a stepfather. Who knows what that relationship was like with the stepfather? It wasn't what she needed. Stepfathers can only go so far. They are not your DNA and they cannot speak to your DNA. So let me get off of here. I got things to do. Not that you guys aren't amazing and I don't love interacting with you. Nobody's telling her the truth. That's very true, Darren. That's probably the issue. And so we've got to deal with not telling somebody the truth, and then they get to ruin their children's lives. And then their children grow up to be men and women in relationships, and mama done lied to you. And now you got to unlearn this lie. And as you unlearn this lie, I remember a friend of mine found out his mother lied about his father, and I've met quite a few. And the moment they find out their mother lied about their father, they don't know if they can trust the women in their lives. And I'm watching other men go through the same thing. I know I have a very close relationship with someone whose mother has just straight up lied to them, and we've learned the lies along the way, like straight lied. And in the midst of lying, don't want to be caught in your lie. So you keep lying, although you know the answer. And it's a very difficult thing in your cognitive perspective to say, my mother lied to me all this time and my whole life has been a lie. And so men find themselves in the midst of divorce. They find themselves in the midst of psychosis and breakdowns and midlife crisis because they found out their mother's lied. There's a client that I've dealt with. There's a gentleman that I had on speaking. There's a friend of my husband's who I've had that conversation with. And there's another client right now dealing with that very thing. How do I deal with that? That my mother lied. She was the one who pushed my father out. She was the one with all the issues. And guess what? You fathers never do. Majority of you. Some of y'all trashy. Some of y'all girls. But majority of men don't do one thing. They never trash the mother. And so the children are just walking around believing that the mother was right because the dad never trashes the mother. So just go back and look at the statistics. The statistics are real. And fatherlessness, actions louder than words. Okay, actions speak louder than words, Amanda said. They actually do. And you got to do the action steps in order to heal yourself so that you can come from underneath these multi-generational curses, psychosis. The pandemic of fatherlessness is taking us out left and right. I would beg to believe that divorce rate is so high, not just because it became easy, but because you're dealing with a generation of people who never saw it emulated, who never saw what it was like to have a father in the home. And also they're dealing with so much childhood trauma and wounds that they refuse to deal with. You're dealing with so much unwed pregnancy because you've got people who are broken and traumatized, and they're dealing with all of that, trying to navigate relationships, and it doesn't work because you don't have the tools. The statistics are scary, Paul, but I'm telling you, if you listen, I know you've been on here from the beginning, they're on the down. They're coming down. But we've got to be able to help all cultures see what each culture needs, because each culture is different. Cultures are based in tradition, right, and community. And so each culture is different. We all have different oral traditions, and we've got to recognize what that looks like. If you look at Black families, there's a lot of oral traditions that come down from slavery. And a lot of people think fatherlessness is steeped in the slavery. And I agree to some degree. I agree to some degree, but I disagree to another. Because even in slavery, Black families were getting married even at the idea of being killed and whipped and beaten. So family meant something. And yes, you were separated. And yes, it taught men to buck, and it taught all these other different things. It did a lot of different things. And then Hispanic families, because they're only counting 3 cultures at this point. Asian families typically don't have this where we report it in America. But I can tell you, I've gotten emails from Tokyo, Japan, and from Singapore, and they're having their issues. They are having their issues with fatherlessness. And let me give you the breakdown. The issues of fatherlessness in the Asian countries is that men marry women, and at a certain age, they divorce these women. And when you get married in certain countries, you cannot, as a woman, have a job. And so you may have an education, because they require that. But then when you get married and you have children, you can't work. And then he divorces you for some younger, faster model, and you are left in poverty. This is a real thing happening in Asian countries. I've been emailed multiple times, and I had to look it up. And people sent me statistics, and they were like, we really need help on how to deal with this, because these women and their children are being thrown into the street, and now they're living in ghettos, which is like, in your head, you're like, Asia has a ghetto? Asia has a place where they throw away mothers and children? They do. We're just not counting them in this fatherless generation at this point in our country, but they have this whole situation in their on their continent. So, yeah. And then Hispanics, some of that's migrant working. Some of that's not that the dad isn't calling and being a part of the life, but he has to go work in California, although you live in Georgia, because that's part of the migration. That's when strawberries or peppers or whatever's being picked. And I got to go there for 6 months or 9 months out of the year to get it done. Right? Black families, mass incarceration, war on drugs, crack cocaine era. There was a lot of stuff going on. We all have different reasons, and we need to figure out how to be a solution to each one of those. So I am Dr. Torri J. I'm going to get off of here, and I hope you guys are having a great day. Continue to have an awesome day. I got some good stuff coming up for you. Okay. So I look forward to sharing it with you, and I'm going to continue to come on here 3 days a week for Healing Tuesday on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Help is on the way. We're going to do that at 1 p.m. from here on out. 12 p.m. On Thursdays. And then this will always be at 1 p.m. on Fridays. Sorry about today. I had a meeting that came up out of nowhere, and I had to go take the meeting, and they talk a lot. I tried to get back in time. I was like, I'm be here for 45 minutes and I'm out. And it went way over. So, all right, you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye-bye.